Welcome back, Raider Nation. It's time for another edition of Silver and Black. Today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Also heard on the radio in Las Vegas, 101.5 KDAWN and 840 KXNT. Hello to our audience in Las Vegas. We appreciate you being with us. It's Skockle Branson. It's Mo Moten. It's time to talk some Raiders football ahead of Sunday's game against the Indianapolis Colts out at Lucas Oil Stadium in downtown Indy. And we're here to talk about it. We're also going to take your phone calls in the third segment. Second segment, we're going to preview the game. This first segment, we're going to get you up to date on the news and our views of what's happening with the Raiders. I know it's been a tough week after the big loss to the Chicago Bears, other big losses, which we'll talk about here in a second. And again, do us a favor, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That's right. If you're listening to us on the radio or you're watching us on video, do us a big favor. Also subscribe to the audio. Anywhere you get your audio, just look for Silver and Black Today. Do us a favor, rate and review as well. We appreciate that very, very much. And if you're watching us on that video channel, whichever one you're on, do us a favor there. Subscribe, hit the thumbs up and the notifications bell so you know every time we have a new video. Scott and Mo with you. Mo is my partner. He is a senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report. If you're new to the show, also a Raiders columnist at sportsnot.com. Follow him on X at Mo Moten, M-O-E-M-O-T-O-N. I am at LV Gully. The show SNB today. Oh, Mo, the Raiders' misery continues. Kolton Miller was thought to have a high ankle sprain. Well, he had that, but he also had a hairline fracture. Kolton Miller is out. We don't know for how long. He is on IR. So the Raiders situation, which already looked dire because of what's been happening with this team and its inability to execute and the inability of the coaching staff to perhaps make adjustments and pick the right starting lineups, now is without its best offensive lineman outside of Jackson Powers Johnson, of course, the veteran Kolton Miller, who just signed his big deal in the offseason, his extension. This is not where you want to be. Injuries happen in the NFL. This is why you have to have depth. But Mo, from a morale standpoint and just a piling on standpoint, this is not good. And we're going to see what happens in Indy on Sunday with how this offensive line adjusts without Kolton Miller in there.
Not a good sign at all, Scott. And it's probably the worst case scenario because a high ankle sprain probably would have kept him out anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. We've seen a lot of high ankle sprains this season with players going on injured reserve, CeeDee Lamb being probably one of the biggest cases. But those players eventually come back and able to help their team. Kolton Miller, the way Rappaport framed his post on X, he could miss the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Which means that the Raiders are looking at Stone Forsythe, who allowed 67 pressures and 7 sacks over the last 2 years. He was awful in pass protection. Or they're looking at Charles Grant, the rookie third rounder, who Pete Carroll kind of alluded that he's not ready, but he'll compete for the job. Again, that keyword compete again, which is now annoying me when he says it because it's only applies to certain players, but that's a different topic for a different day. But Charles Grant is the guy I think should get some playing time because I said this on X, Scott. I'd rather watch a rookie make his mistakes early in his career versus watching a veteran make the same mistakes over and over again. Unless Charles Grant is putting Geno Smith in harm's way on every single snap, let the rookie make his mistakes, develop him. He's your potential future swing tackle. Why not develop him?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Forsythe, and I agree with you on Grant's Forsythe, and I know how much you and Steve Spagnuolo love Pro Football Focus grades. So if you follow Mo on X, you know what that's all about. But if you look at his grades, and these are all directional, right? What value they have, you can be the judge. I think Pro Football Focus grades are really just for fans, and it's a product they sell, and you consume it. But his score, now, the scores, the higher, the better, right? I mean, just like anything else. Forsythe scores in 1,043 snaps, 35, 58, 43, and 53. So I'm just using that as a gauge. You already mentioned based on the pressures and all the other stats, which are much more meaningful, obviously, than PFF grades. But it's not good. But I anticipate they're rolling, just based on what Pete Carroll said, they're rolling him out there Sunday. But do you think he's going to be on a quick hook? I'll ask you that question with Grant behind him. And obviously Grant making some progress they're seeing in practice, because I don't think Pete Carroll would have said about about moving him in unless they feel like they see something happening there.
I don't think he's on a quick hook because, one, if Grant truly isn't ready to play, as they don't think he is yet, apparently, then Forsythe will probably get at least 2 to 3 games, unless he's, allowing an absurd amount of pressures, maybe 10 to 12 pressures. Then you gotta pull him, right? But other than that, short of a full blown disaster at left tackle, I expect him to start multiple games before they roll Grant out there. And the sad part about it is they don't have a middle option. Like, they don't have a guy who's a backup that has some starting experience, but is better than Stone Forsythe and just hasn't been terrible. Stone Forsythe, you can argue, has been one of the worst tackles in the league playing on the left and right side.
Yes. And I would anticipate, we saw Tuesday, we saw the Raiders bring in some offensive linemen on tryouts. Nobody of note, to be honest with you. I expect that to continue through the next several weeks. They need bodies. And they need players that they can put in. If Grant and other folks are not ready to play, then you have to go get somebody, because if somebody goes down, what are you going to do? So the Raiders will do that. Now, I don't foresee them making any trades, clearly, but I do think that you'll see some bodies coming in. But this Miller injury too, I think, anytime you lose a veteran leader on a unit, in this case, the offensive line, the impact of that goes far beyond the play. It goes to that room and what's happening with that group. And that group, much maligned, they improved in the Bears game significantly. And you look at where they're at, this is a huge setback for the rest of them too, which now you want to see what happens in Indy on Sunday. Do they take another big step back, or are they able to continue on the momentum? For me, that's going to be something I'm going to watch significantly in this game against the Colts.
That's a good focal point to focus on. Me, I'm looking at where, and just kind of dovetail what you said, the energy. Where is this team's energy going to be in its third trip going west to east, East Coast time zone, so to speak, with a 1 p.m. kickoff? Now, while Colton Miller is not a vocal leader by any means, he's arguably their best offensive lineman. So without that leader by example, now, in my opinion, JPJ is probably their best offensive lineman, right? But he's young. He's in his second year, and Pete Carroll has, let's be honest, has downplayed his position on an offensive line, basically saying he's competing for a spot.
Yeah.
So someone's got to take the mantle and take hold of the leadership role in that position group without Colton Miller. And how does that look once they're out on the field? And they let go of that first sack. They allow that first sack on Geno Smith. Do things start to roll downhill, or is someone take charge and say, "Hey, we're not going to let the Colts pummel our offensive line. We're going to open up some running lanes like we did last week for Ashton Genty, and we're going to march the ball downfield and score some points." That's what I'm looking at: energy level and who takes that leadership position.
Great points, Mo. And to me, this is a massive, massive game. Look, the Raiders are not going to the playoffs. I said in the chat with folks watching our show on Tuesday on YouTube, they asked me, what do you think, would you revise your win total? I said, yeah, I'm going down to 4. That's where I'm at right now until they show me something different. And I think 4 might even be generous. We'll see. But this game against the Colts, Mo, offensively, for what you just talked about, the energy, this offensive unit needs to have a good game. And that includes Geno Smith, of course. You have to have the quarterback. You have to have that offensive line, despite the injury, have to do that. And you want to see Ashton Genty, that running game. And that's predicated on, of course, the offensive line. You want to see that running game have another good game. Consistency, right? Consistency is what it's about. So to me, yeah, the pressure's on the entire Raider team to try to turn this thing around before it really goes in the sewer. But this offensive unit has got to show something against Indianapolis. Now, look, you watch the Bengals the Bengals have quit. They had no competitiveness about them at all. It's going to cost their coach and their GM their jobs, and that maybe it should. And yes, they lost Joe Burrow, but they didn't even want to compete. The only person who wanted to compete was Jamar Chase. So I want to see the Raiders, to your point, I want to see how the Raiders react to all of this, because it was another week of, if you want to call it negativity outside the building. I'm not saying it's like that inside, because we don't know. But outside the building, the pressure, the talk about the failures, all that stuff, including here on our show. So you want to see how they respond to that, and going on the road to face a team that's 3-1 that has a good energy about it, despite coming off a loss, is something that I think these are one of those pivotal moments in the season, I believe.
Well, last week I called that game against the Bears a must win. The Raiders didn't win it. So obviously I think it's going to be a long season from here on out. I'm not going to revise my win total, but if you would ask me today, I'd probably say I would still say there's room for 6 wins on the on the schedule. They do play the Browns and the Giants later in the season. Teams, their injuries. The Texans aren't what they were last year. Still think they could pull out 6, but I wouldn't feel too confident about 7. But what I will say about the upcoming game is since Pete Carroll's been coaching, I have not known a Pete Carroll team to lack energy, right? And that's a testament to his coaching and his personality and what he brings to the table. So if the Raiders come out flat on Sunday and there's no energy, and there's a situation where we saw on Monday night where Jamar Chase said he felt like his teammates didn't want it.
Yeah,
that is a damning statement that you feel like your teammates just don't feel like playing. If that's the case with the Raiders, then yes, then we would be looking at probably a 3-4 win season if apathy is sinking in the first week of October.
Yeah, no question. It will be interesting. I think, too, we have to look at some of the other things. You and I were going back and forth with a couple people online during the week about Brock Bowers. And I had somebody in the chat on YouTube the other night, too, asking about Brock Bowers. Mo, listen, he's not 100%. It's clear. So, especially, I just think with a guy, you got Michael Mayer out with the concussion still. We don't have word on where he's at, but I don't expect him to play against Indy. This is one of the greatest young players in the NFL right now. I would shut him down, at least for a week. I mean, listen, again, you're not going to fight for an AFC championship here. I don't see the point in keeping him out there. Let him rehab, let him get well, so you can get him for the back part of the season.
I get what you're saying there, Scott. The thing is, with Brock Bowers being out there,
Changes the dynamic.
as selfish and wild as it sounds, it, as you just said, it changes the way defenses have to prepare for the Raiders. So
very true.
Having him out there only helps. The problem now is Geno Smith isn't all of that accurate, and his ball placement is very shoddy. So it's kind of a waste of, I don't want to say waste, but it defeats the purpose of having Brock Bowers out there, because Geno Smith can't even get him the ball in the right spots anyway. So maybe you curtail. I haven't looked at detailed his snap count before I got on the show, but maybe you take his snap count down. As you mentioned, you got Michael Mayer there. Michael Mayer was injured because he's concussion protocol, but they had Ian Thomas out there, and I think that's what helped the run game. Ian Thomas had 29 run blocking snaps last week. So shout out to Ian Thomas. I don't think enough people were talking about the job he did with the blocking, but because Ian Thomas is in the point where his career, he's not really a pass catching threat. He's more of a blocking tight end now. It puts more pressure on Brock Bowers, who's at 50-60%. But what I would do is I would significantly curtail his snap count until he's closer to being himself again.
And I'll tell you what, if they lose in Indy and they go to 1-4, then I would shut them down. Then, I mean, at the very least, again, you got to think long term here. Short term's not helping you. You come out, you beat the crap out of Indy, you have a really good game. Okay, fine, I get it. You're trying to scratch back to 500 and maybe make a push or something. I know that seems wildly optimistic, and I think it is, but we'll see how that goes. All right, we're going to take a break. This first time here on this edition of Silver and Black today. Tell you a little bit about our video sponsor. Of course, that is Sleeper Picks. We're going to get to Mo's picks, so you can watch us over on the video if you want to see that. For our audio-ready audience, we'll be back after this. We'll talk about the Indianapolis Colts, what the Raiders are facing, what they're going to have to do to beat this resurgent Colts team out at Lucas Oil Stadium. You're with Scott and Mo. This is Silver and Black today. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. All right, folks, it's time to tell you about our good friends at Sleeper Picks. Of course, they are sponsoring the video here for Silver and Black today all season long. And not only that, but they have a very special offer for our audience. and that is with the Sleeper Picks Daily Fantasy Football. You can get a $100 deposit on your, $100 match on your deposit, if I could speak correctly, $100 match on your first $100 deposit at Sleeper Picks using the code GENTY. That's GENTY as in number 2 for the Raiders. So do that. You go sign up there and get the free $100. How could you go wrong? Today, we're going to have Mo pick tonight's game, Thursday night game, of course, San Francisco and the Los Angeles Rams playing off. And Mo, let's get you on the record here. I did some on Tuesday, so we want to see what you're going to do with these picks for the Rams and the 49ers. So lay them on me, my man.
Let's start out with Christian McCaffrey. The 49ers have some issues. We don't know who their starting quarterback is going to be as of recording this on Wednesday. They're going to, regardless of who it is under center, they're going to ride Christian McCaffrey over on 58.5 rushing yards. Not saying he's the same Christian McCaffrey of old in his prime, but he could still get it done for 60 against the Rams defense.
Okay, so there we have McCaffrey over 58.5 yards. What's next, Mo?
Let's go with Puka Nacua over on his receiving yardage. The 49ers have had some issues covering number 1 wide receivers. So I'm going over on Puka Nacua. You can even drop 60 receiving yards for him. I know it's a little bit, it's not a home run number, but I think it'll get you over and get you the second leg on this parlay.
Okay, so we're going over 60 for Puka Nacua. I like that one too. Actually, I picked something similar to that because the 98.5 was a lot to me, but the 60 to me is a no-brainer on that one. Okay, so we got McCaffrey and Nacua. What's next?
We'll make it a little difficult. Let's go with an anytime touchdown.
Ooh, all right. So we're going anytime touchdown, which you can see up here. I will flip to it if I could find it. Hello. There we go. Anytime TD. All right. See, this is what's cool about this app. You can do all this kind of stuff. Okay. Anytime touchdown. Who are we going with?
Kyren Williams, not just because he's on my fantasy team and these are my hopes and dreams that he reaches the end zone, but just because he's a big part of that offense. I know Blake Corum is sneaking some carries from him, but he is still the workhorse of that offense. And I feel like it's going to be another one of those lower scoring games, kind of a slog. I don't know if you remember this, Scott, the 49ers and Rams had a low scoring game in the rain.
Yes.
Not to say it's going to be that type of low scoring, but I think it's going to be a sluggish start for both offenses, but Kyren Williams sneaks into the end zone for at least 1 touchdown.
All right, so there you go. You have Christian McCaffrey over 58.5 yards. You have Puka Nacua over 60, so 60 plus receiving yards, and Kyren Williams with 1 anytime touchdown. Maxed out here on Sleeper Picks with a $20 selection. You're going to win 51.40. That's a pretty good take there, Mo, for $20. I like that. So that's what Mo's picks. We'll see how he does after we have the terms. But again, don't forget, Sleeper Picks. Go download the app. Make sure you check out the rules and regulations on the app or on the website. And depending on what state you're in, you'll be able to do this. Some states you still can't do it, but most states you can. And don't forget, $100 deposit match. So you put in 100, we're giving you 100 from Sleeper Picks by using the code GENTY. That's GENTY from Sleeper Picks, official sponsor here on Silver and Black Today. Welcome back. Silver and Black Today, segment 2 here of our Odyssey Sports original podcast covering the Las Vegas Raiders. Also heard on the radio, 101.5 KDON and 840 KXNT. Voice isn't quite deep enough to do that whole movie guy thing in a world. Okay. Scott Branson, Mo Moten back with you, goofing off, of course, because we're talking about football. We're not talking about world hunger or anything so important, but I know for Raider Nation how important football is. Raiders getting ready to take on the Indianapolis Colts out in Indianapolis on Sunday. Early game for the West Coast, 10 a.m., 1 p.m. Eastern. It is in the Eastern time zone. Yes, Indianapolis is in the Midwest, but it is in the Eastern time zone. So get ready for that. We're going to go over that, some of that. But Mo, thinking about the Raiders going east again, 3rd time in 5 weeks. We're not about excuses here. I'm not giving them an excuse, but that's a tough haul for a team, especially a team that's struggling to have to play another early game.
It is. I don't know if you remember, Scott. I'm not sure if it was Warren Sharp, who does a very good job with the intricacies of the schedule and teams and how they play, who they play. But it was floated out that the Raiders have the least amount of rest between games across the league, meaning time between gameplay the previous week and then the upcoming week, right? So when you look at the travel, 3 East Coast time zone games in the first 5 weeks.
5 weeks, yeah.
That's brutal. I don't remember the last time I've seen that on a schedule. Of course, I'm not a fan of every team, but it's for the Raiders that's abnormal. But as you said, no excuses, right? They got to go out. You got to play the schedule that's given to you. You got to go out and win football games. But this is why I said, Scott, that they had to win these early games. I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
the post I had on X. Number one, they don't have much depth. So we all know injuries happen every year. Injuries are going to happen. That's inevitable. And the Raiders don't have the depth to cover for some of their starters being out. So they had to win those early games while they were still mostly healthy.
Yeah.
Now you got Colton Miller out. I think people are underselling the fact that Eric Stokes may not play. We don't know what his status is with that knee sprain. He's been their best cornerback. And now you have to fill these spots. And the schedule gets even tougher in the second half of the schedule, not with the travel, but with the opponents they have to play. They still have to play the Chiefs twice. And by the way, the Chiefs are starting to look like the Chiefs again with Xavier Worthy back in the lineup. They still have to play Denver twice. And they still have to play the reigning champions in the second half of the season. So it's not getting any easier. And you're probably going to have to do without Kolton Miller. And I know, Scott, that I didn't think the Colts would be much in the offseason. I didn't predict them
None
to
of us
win more
did.
than 4 games. But Daniel Jones, looking pretty good. So before you downplay Daniel Jones and his play in the previous years, he's the new Daniel Jones, Indiana Jones in Indianapolis under Shane Steichen. And he could give the Raiders some issues in the passing game with the receivers that he has on the perimeter.
And my continued reminder that Shane Steichen is a UNLV Rebel, right? Former UNLV quarterback. We'll put that aside for you Raider fans. You want to beat him? Got to get that in there. Just like if he was a St. John guy, you would definitely, absolutely. But you look at Daniel Jones, and here's a guy, you talk about resurrecting yourself, but I think the best word I could use for him right now is facilitator. I mean, you look at his QBR, it's 87.7. On pocket throws, he's got a 71.6 completion percentage. That's what Geno Smith was supposed to be able to do. But more than that, I watched 2 games yesterday, Mo, quickly going through the all 22 of some of Colts games, is Daniel Jones's accuracy. I didn't see that with the Giants. But in this passing game run by Shane Steichen, as you mentioned, I just look at him and he looks like the guy that they hyped coming out of college. He looks much more accurate and much more comfortable in that pocket. Now, when he's under severe pressure, he still looks like the Daniel Jones we know. We'll talk about that in a second under the negatives. But it's pretty impressive what he's been able to do. And it also goes to something that you talk about and we talk about on this show all the time, which is right player in the right situation with the right coaching, things can change significantly.
Over 71% completion rate for Daniel Jones going into this Raider game. So the Raiders are going to have to deal with not having their top cornerback. Kyu Blu Kelly is struggling. By the way, Kyu Blu Kelly's passer rating allowed is up at 132.2 out of a possible 158.3 right now. He is struggling. We love Kyu Blu Kelly in the offseason, but let's be honest, it ain't working at CB2. And Darnay Holmes is still your slot cornerback, if not Jeremy Chin. So Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, if he plays. Alec Pierce was in concussion protocol last week, but he's their deep threat if he plays. Adonai Mitchell had some gaffes last week, cost the Colts 2 touchdowns. One, he let go of the ball before he reached the end zone. But if those guys pull it together, it's going to be tough sledding for the Raiders in pass coverage. And I put out this video on Bleacher Report on Wednesday stating that I think the Raiders should acquire Reek Woolen. And people are probably thinking, we had offensive line issues. We're not even thinking about our secondary. Well, wait till Sunday comes.
Yeah, then you'll start thinking about
it. When if Eric Stokes is on the sideline and Kyu Blu Kelly is getting cooked in coverage, then you're going to want to say, oh, maybe we should acquire Reek Woolen. And I think that's going to be the conversation that's going to be had after that game, unfortunately. We'll see. I'm hoping for the best, of course, Scott. But I'm looking ahead and I'm thinking, the Raiders secondary, it could fall apart on Sunday if Daniel Jones and his receiver corps gets going.
And there's been no players brought in at those positions for evaluation. So the Raiders aren't on, I'm sure it's on their radar, but you're right. If they get really exposed against the Colts, then you might see that as well. By the way, Caillou Blue Kelly, Vegas kid, grew up in Vegas, went to Bishop Gorman, of course, where my wife and kids went to high school. So he's a local kid, and you want to see him do well, but he's really, really struggling. The other thing with the Colts that this defense, the Raiders defense, is going to have to contend with is a resurgent and dominant Jonathan Taylor. He's the NFL's current leading rusher at 338 yards. They have a top 3 ground game overall. It sets up the play action, which is why you're seeing Daniel Jones doing so well. And more than that, we saw the Raiders unable to produce offensively, which kept their defense on the field for a long, long time. We talked about this on Tuesday. That's what the Colts do, Mo. They control the clock. They've been very dominant at it. It's why they have 3 wins out of 4 weeks. And so this defense and again, the complementary football here against this Colts team is going to be massive.
The other thing I'm looking at is the battle in the trenches. So Quentin Nelson is star guard in the league. He was a 6th overall pick in, I believe, 2018. He has changed the complexion of that Colts offensive line. Brings a nastiness to it, opens up lanes for the run game, and that's part of the reason why Jonathan Taylor is successful in leading the league and what he's leading the league in with his rushing categories. But the Raiders' defensive line has played relatively well. Outside of one game against Washington where they allow over 200 rushing yards, their run defense has been pretty good. So I'm wondering how that matchup pans out. Does the Raiders' run defense stand up to Jonathan Taylor and Quentin Nelson? Or is it another game like we saw in Washington where the floodgates just open and they're able to run the ball at will? Because if they're able to also run the ball at will, then we're looking at a blowout. Because I already have my questions about the pass coverage.
Yeah.
If they get Jonathan Taylor going, then it's going to be a washout. But I'm hoping that we see the Raiders' run defense do what it's done for the most part in the first quarter of the season, and able to bottle up the run game and keep things balanced.
Mo, let's get into a little bit of that defensive backfield again. I know we already talked about it, but I want to get back to it because the Colts rank 2nd in points per game with 31. All right. They are scoring on 77% of their possessions. I mean, you talk about efficiency. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Then you look at the play calling of Shane Steichen, and this is where I want you to talk specifically a little X's and O's here, because they exploit zone coverages. They have an 81.4% completion rate against zone coverages. What are the Raiders going to do? What are they going to do to switch this up and to play this offense effectively, knowing that, you don't have all the talent in the world, but knowing what Patrick Graham likes to do, what's he going to have to change in order to keep up with this Colts team?
You might see Maxx Crosby dropping coverage a little more. I know that drives Raider fans crazy.
I know, but hey.
But the Raiders are going to have to get creative because the Colts drafted Tyler Warren in the 1st round this year. And he's been involved in their offense. A lot of people didn't think he would be too effective because of Daniel Jones and what he's been over the past few years. But they're using Tyler Warren along with that receiving core. And the Raiders are going to have to cover the middle of the field. Their linebackers and their safeties are going to have to be ready to cover that tight end position, because that could be a mismatch to look out for. I know the Raiders don't have an elite cover defender, but Jermaine Pratt is pretty solid. Jamal Adams is still out there. They're going to have to pay attention to those soft zones, because if Tyler Warren gets going along with Pittman and Downs and Pierce, if he plays, and Adonai Mitchell, it's going to be open season. You're going to see Daniel Jones' completion rate, probably go up to about 75%. And that's what you don't want, because that tight end opens that cheat code for quarterbacks to get those easy completions over the middle, and the Raiders are going to have to defend that.
Yeah, I mean, this receiving core in Indy is the most underrated in the NFL. You look at it, of course, you mentioned Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Tyler Warren, who you talked about, Alec Pierce, 364 yards after the catch. Mm-hmm. So the Raiders, who have had trouble tackling at times, dude, you're going to have to wrap up, because these guys are coming out ready to play. Let's switch over to the defense with a few minutes we have left here, Mo, which is they're holding opponents to 20.8 points per game. That's the 8th fewest in the league. They've had opportunities to score. They've also played teams like the Titans. They've had some soft teams to play with, but they're a cohesive, well-coached unit on the defensive defensive side of the ball. The pass rush is hit and miss. It's the fourth worst with a win rate at 25%. So the Raiders have opportunity against this defense to get Geno Smith and that pass game going.
So a couple of things here. I did take a look at their pass rushing numbers. And that's one thing that I found kind of surprising because they have DeForest Buckner and have Kwity Paye on that line, but they're not an aggressive team when it comes to rushing the passes. So Geno Smith, even without Kolton Miller with Stone Forsythe there at left tackle, Geno Smith should have some time to throw the football downfield.
Mm-hmm.
Can he be accurate? Can he not throw the ball to the wrong team? Because he should have some time to get the ball to Trey Tucker and company and Jacoby Myers and hopefully Brock Bowers. But there shouldn't be any excuse about, oh, Geno Smith was under duress unless Stone Forsythe is just a turnstile at left tackle, which is quite possible, by the way.
Yep.
But if there's any decent amount of time for Geno Smith to sit back in the pocket, which there should be with this Colts defensive line, the Raiders offense, the passing attack needs to get going to balance and counter what the Colts are going to do offensively. Really quick, Scott, too, I will say, while the Colts opponents haven't been great early in the season, the Dolphins, the Broncos are pretty good, and they also play the Titans. That Rams game, I watched
27 points.
They could have scored 30. As I said, Adonai Mitchell lets go of the football before he reaches the end zone. He also cost them another touchdown. The Colts should have had 14 more points on the Rams. The Rams are a Super Bowl contender, and the Colts should have put up 30 on them. Should have, would have, could have. But look at the replay for yourself. Adonai Mitchell scores that touchdown. It's a different ball game. So I'm not looking down on the Rams just because they beat up on the Dolphins and the Tennessee Titans. They beat the Denver Broncos. So it was a pretty good team. They gave the Rams everything they could handle last week. Super Bowl contender. So Raiders better be ready for this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough sled, man. I mean, this Colts team, it has inconsistencies at linebacker, of course. They're making moves there and in the secondary as well. So, which we just talked about. So they have opportunity. The Raiders can come out. This would be a huge win on the road in any way you put it. All right, we're going to step aside for our final break here on Silver and Black today. When we come back, we're going to take your phone calls on the Raider Nation switchboard. It's Mo, it's Scott, it's Silver and Black today. We're coming right back. Welcome back, home stretch here. Final segment of this edition of Silver and Black today. Odyssey Sports Original Podcast, also heard on the radio, 1015 KDON, 840 KXNT in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. Scott and Mo with you. It's time when we turn the show over to you. We take your calls. Our podcast, if you didn't listen to it on Tuesday, we had calls. People called in and their tone was a lot like this. They were dejected. They were drained. I felt more of a drain because that's how I felt watching the game myself. Raider Nation was just blah. So we'll see what they're saying today. But Mo, maybe we'll get a little more energy out of them, knowing that you can kind of erase last week with a good performance against Indy.
At least we hope. Because it would be so Raiders, and I've lived this for quite some time. You're kind of resigned that, the season might be not a waste, but it's probably going to be a losing season with a losing record. And then the Raiders turn around and they surprise you with this out of nowhere win, and you're like, how did they win that game?
Yeah,
and it pulls you back in for the time being. And I hope I'm really Scott, I'm really hoping, not just because we do a show, but because I have to talk about the Raiders, after these post games. And I feel like I've had to explain the Raiders' losses so many times, and I get on these shows and I'm like, another tough loss. I want to get on and be upbeat about a victory. So I'm hoping the Raiders are at least competitive. But of course, above all, just win.
Yes.
Just win.
Just win. Okay. Elias is the first call up. Here he is.
Hey, Scott. Hey, Mo. This is Elias calling from Los Angeles. Just wanted to call real quick. So I saw something real funny on Twitter. Also, I don't know how to fix the Raiders. Watching these games, man, zero hope at this point for me. But one of the best things one of the things that I saw on Twitter that I thought was really funny and is absolutely going to be true is that the most Raider thing to happen is that we beat the Colts this week by 10 points, just so everybody gets back on the bandwagon, and then we lose to the winless Titans by 3 points, probably a game-winning field goal. I don't want to take credit for that little tidbit there. I forgot who I saw that posted that on Twitter, but that's just that's just how it is. We always fall into these trap games. It's a constant roller coaster. There's highs, there's lows. This whole off season was a high. Week 1 was a high, and now we've got 3 straight weeks of lows. And if we win this week against the Colts, great. I'll have hope again. And then just a classic Raiders trap game. Just like the Colts from a few years ago with Jeff Saturday. Last year when the Panthers started Andy Dalton, as soon as all of these things happened, that week before the games, I knew we were going to lose those games. So, I don't think we're going to beat the Colts, to be honest, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's exactly what happens. And then we go into week 6 against the Titans and lose in heartbreaking fashion once again. But anyways, yeah, sorry I didn't get to your challenge there, Scott. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on how this team is. So love the show. Love what you guys do. Have a great rest of the week. Go Raiders. Bye.
All right, there you go. And the challenge I had at the end of last show was tell us what you do to fix the Raiders. That's what he's talking about. But Mo, I mean, I laughed only because I think he's right. I've never seen a team and a poor fan base that has to go through that. And he brings up a good point. Yeah, you go do something you shouldn't do, and then you have a game that you should win and you lose it. It's very Raider-like.
As I said, Scott, it's one of those times where you feel like the Raiders will have that win where you're not expecting much. You go into the game thinking, all right, I have no expectations. I just want to watch the game. I just want to see good football. And then they win the game, and then all of a sudden you find yourself creeping back into the room of hope, and you're like, maybe we could turn this around. And then they let you down again with a terrible loss to a bad football team who's winless and didn't score a point. The Titans didn't score a point, Scott, last week.
I know, incredible.
I watched that entire game. They didn't score anything last week.
But against the Raiders, Cam Ward will have like 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. Right? That's what Elias is saying is basically that. But yeah, thanks for the call, man. We appreciate you. Make sure you call back in. All right, now we're going to Johnny in Florida.
Scott and Mo. This is Johnny in Florida via California. I don't understand this team, man. That was a heartbreaking loss. But it's crazy how Pete Carroll can talk about him being competitive and competition, but it seems he's playing favoritism towards certain players. I just don't understand it. You know what I mean? Why not yank Geno Smith and put Kenny Pickett in there? You know what I mean? Change it up. But he's going to roll with his guys and like die with his guys. I just don't understand it, how he could even talk about Jackson Powers Johnson being put to the test, who is obviously one of the better linemen on the line. And it just makes you like, I don't know. I just think the game has passed up Pete Carroll. And I think the Raiders need to go in a different direction. And they got to draft better. We got numerous draft picks that don't even see the field. Wasting a second-round pick. That's supposed to be an impact player. And he ain't even on the field. And multiple other picks. You know what I mean? So I'm not sold on this team. And like I said, you got to win in the trenches and you got to draft the right players and bring in the right players. Let me know what you think. Johnny out.
Johnny with another good call from Florida. Mo, he brings up a question. I was interacting in the chat the other night with our listeners and viewers on YouTube, and a lot of them kept saying, why aren't you talking about Spy Tech? Why aren't you talking about Spy Tech? Which we have. But the Pete Carroll questions that Johnny brings up, all very relevant, and I agree with him. We've talked about them for the last week. But with Spy Tech, when you're talking about player personnel decisions and acquisitions and draft picks, we could talk about it till we're blue in the face. Nothing's going to happen. That work is done already. Now, adding players because of injury or making trades, fine. But I just don't, evaluating John Spy Tech and his plan for this season obviously did not go well obtaining players for the offensive line. Alex Kappa was not exactly a banner signing. So we can criticize and talk about that, but you hear what I'm saying on that? I mean, I don't know what else we can talk about Spy Tech. those are long-term moves and things that are not done week in, week out, like coaching with Pete Carroll and making decisions on who's playing and who's not playing.
So this is how I see it. And I don't know if you remember me saying this after the draft. You can rewind the tape film, whatever you want to call it. But I said that I liked the fact that they I'm fine with the fact that they went with Ashton Genty in the first round. Okay with it. I would have chose Armand Membu. We went through that discussion. But I also said the downside of this class is that there may not be many year one impact players. Now, we thought Jack Bech would have a bigger role at this point in the season. We thought he was more pro ready than Dante Thornton Jr. Dante Thornton Jr. outside that first that catch in week 1, that big catch at the end of the game from Geno Smith, hasn't done much. So I hear what Johnny's saying. I hear what a lot of Raider Nation is saying in the fact that, yeah, what's done is done with this draft class. But how do you have a bunch of day 2 picks who should be borderline impact players early in their careers, and 2 of these guys have been healthy? Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers, 2 third-rounders, offensive line. They've been healthy scratches, Scott. Jack Bech, nowhere to be found. Jack Bech was brought up at a press conference with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll said, we need to get him more snaps. And it's like, okay, but what's going on with his development? Why didn't he get more snaps in the first quarter of the season? And I think that's where the question lies. Not that we can judge these picks now, because sometimes you got to wait 2-3 years to see what these guys will be. But this class is very light on early impact players.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, but the choice of where those players, or if those players make it in the lineup, that's not spy tech. So you're right about 2 third-round offensive linemen, especially with this team with the problems it's had. Why are they healthy scratches? That's a Pete Carroll decision, is it not?
It is. It's a Pete Carroll decision. It's also it's a potential coaching issue, because your general manager is supposed to align with your coaching staff and get those guys the players that they need to get on the field as soon as possible. So I don't want to say there's a disconnect, but you got players who the coaching staff doesn't feel comfortable or confident in to play right away, and their early picks, their top 100 picks. Now, we may see Darian Porter on the field on Sunday, but that's only because, as I mentioned in the first segment, Eric Stokes has a knee sprain. So at first, we thought Darian Porter was going to be an impact player. He was running with the ones during OTAs and early training camp. And then he just kind of faded behind Kyu Bukele, who's struggling right now. So maybe we get some good stuff out of Darian Porter and kind of gives us some hope about this draft class and its early impact. But so far, the returns with the coaching staff and their decisions, not much going.
Right. And the first crack the media will get at Spy Tech will be during the bye. Well, usually the bye week, the GM will do a presser. So we'll have to wait a few more weeks for that. But I think those questions, I think the reporters will ask those questions, by the way. All right, let's get out to Lonnie now. Here's Lonnie.
Hey, Scott and Mo, this is Lonnie from Fontana. I wasn't going to call. I was just trying to kind of keep my composure until I heard the post-game show with Scott and Murph, and they got me all fired up. Certainly share a lot of sentiments with what was said. I think the specific thing I really want to dial into, though, and this might come up on these calls, is that last minute and a half or so, 2 minutes, trying to get into field goal position. They seemed like they were doing some good things and getting down there. And then it felt like once Kolton Miller got injured, they call that, I think it was an inside trap play, rather than just trying to get the dang first down and move a little closer, get Carlson a little bit closer into field goal range, still with having, I think, 2 timeouts. It really made me scratch my head. I didn't quite understand what they were doing there. I'd love to hear you guys' take on that, because I felt like, again, it seemed to me like, again, all things aside from that game and all the ups and downs and frustrations, they had a chance to, again, get closer. And I don't know what occurred, if maybe the Kolton Miller injury spooked them and they were worried about foresight from that side and what was going to happen. So anyway, love to hear you guys' take. As always, I appreciate the show, and I appreciate your sensibilities and just how level-headed you guys are. Thank you always.
Well, thank you for that, Lonnie.
Bye.
Thank you for that, Lonnie. We appreciate it. And Mo, we talked about this last show. No confidence in Geno Smith, who had been throwing interceptions every time he touched the ball. But they did get tight towards the end of that game. And I love that Raider Nation's still talking about the last game, and it's Thursday. But you got to love, I mean, that's what happened. They got really conservative towards the end of that game. You got about 40 seconds before we got to head out.
As I said, it's the opposite of what we saw in week 1, where they got aggressive throwing the ball downfield with Geno Smith to Dante Thorne Jr. They got tight, they got conservative, and that's what happens. When you are a conservative team that settles, you typically lose football games, and that's exactly what happened to the Raiders against the Bears.
Absolutely. All right, for our radio audience, we're going to say goodbye. We appreciate you being here. Make sure you catch the show next week. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Silver and Black Today, wherever you get your audio. Don't forget to rate and review and check out our YouTube channel. And we are on every social media channel where you can also like the show and get right to it. For everybody here, including our producer on the radio in Las Vegas, that is Mr. Mark Bonilla, and our producer at Odyssey, Mike Robier. For Mo Moten, I'm Scott Branson. We'll see you later. Take care, everybody. All right, for our video audience and for our podcast audience, we roll on, Mo. We still got a couple more calls that we're going to get to here, and we're going out to Raider Vato in Georgia. Here we go.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Raider Vato coming out of Newton, Georgia. And, man, Geno Smith, man, what the heck is, what? We got okey doke, man. Man. Like, is that Minshew under that Geno Smith mask? I don't know. I'm just playing, but man, last week I was like thinking like, okay, if they can just get the run game going, and then we'll be fine. And what happens? They get the run game going, but then freaking Geno Smith is, freaking throwing 3 picks again. Something out of that shotgun pistol formation. I get scared, man. You would think you'd be able to see the field more and be able to diagnose the defense better, but I guess not. But man, Genty looked awesome. Defense looked pretty good. I mean, it wasn't great, but man, if we would have had our stuff like this back in 2016, if the defense was playing at least this way, man, it would have been, we would have went a little farther if not for Carr breaking his leg, but I digress. Anyway, man, what do you think? Is it Kenny Pickett time? Do we need to do that? Should Geno Smith be in the film room with Tom Brady? Like, I don't want this to be the way it's going, man. Like, it sucks. You get some things going, and then the offense is, like, playing like this. Get the offense going, and then the defense sucks. You get everything going, and then the run game, there's, like, nothing. I don't know, man. It's just crazy. Anyway, what y'all think, man?
There we go. Raider Vato in Georgia. Thanks for calling in, man. Some good points there. At what point, what would have to happen, Mo, for Pete Carroll to throw Kenny Pickett in the game on Sunday?
If Geno Smith goes out there and he throws 2 interceptions within the first half and there's not much going in the passing game, I'm benching him for the second half. I'm benching him for the second half, and a lot of people say you should just bench him after the first interception. You give him a chance to rebound off of that. I know what it's looked like over the past few weeks, but you don't bench a guy after 1 interception. But after the second interception, I say, look, Geno, we're gonna put you on ice. We're gonna put you in rice. Reset. Come back next week. Kenny Pickett, go out there. Because one thing I will say about Kenny Pickett, because a lot of people criticize the Kenny Pickett trade, right? One thing Kenny Pickett doesn't do is turn the ball over a whole lot. Is he an explosive? Is he a high volume passer that's going to throw for 300 yards? Absolutely not. But one thing Kenny Pickett does do well is protects the football. So if the Raiders have the run game going and the passing game is still what it was last week, I'm definitely thinking about putting in Kenny Pickett, because at least I know Kenny Pickett is not going to give the ball to the other team 3 times within the first 3 quarters. So I think at this point it has to be on the table. I don't think Pete Carroll's thinking this way, because let's be honest, Geno Smith is Pete Carroll's guy, and he's going to give Geno Smith every opportunity to turn this thing around. But if he's turning the ball over, and this should apply to every player, whether you're Geno Smith or a rookie or a middle of the road player, if you're turning the ball over, you got to sit down. You got to sit.
Yeah.
That's bottom
You got
line.
it. If you're hurting your team more than you're helping them, that's what by the way, I have an inside source with the Raiders. I just got this internal memo from the coaching staff to Geno Smith. It says, Geno, on Sunday, do not throw the ball to players wearing blue jerseys. So
that would be nice.
So they're officially
Very
sent
nice.
a memo to Geno Smith.
Right.
So we'll see. Raider Votto, thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right. I'm going to close out the show with our good buddy from Hawaii, and that is MDM, who we had some good chat with the other night on YouTube. He was going a little crazy in there. It was good stuff. All right, here's MDM.
Hey, aloha, guys. This is MDM giving you guys a call from Hawaii. And Scott, you asked the question, how would I fix the Raiders? Now, first off, to premise what I'm going to say, I don't think there is fixing it this year. I think we're maybe a 3 to 4 at best 5-win team this year. So I think it's more moving forward. And I get the kind of the feeling that we didn't think we were going to be great this year anyway. And they weren't necessarily completely straightforward with the expectations they had. But moving into next year, I mean, the main thing, we say this every year, we got to get our quarterback down. We got to get a quarterback in the draft. You cannot get a good quarterback usually in free agency. So I would start evaluating. There's 2 quarterbacks I like. It's Mendoza and it's Mateer. So I would start there, and I would be heavily scouting quarterbacks in this draft. Offensive line needs to get fixed. Looking at the offensive line, it's a much better free agency class, much better draft for OL. You don't have to take an OL in the top 10. And I think the Raiders are going to have a top 5 pick. So I would seriously start fixing that offensive line. And I think fans are frustrated because our evaluation of the talent currently on the team this offseason was poor. And I put that on SpyTech. Using a 2nd-round pick on Beck instead of going OL, that was crazy. And then they're trying to prove a point and switch people around like JPJ. Just bad move altogether. I still think Carroll can be a very good coach, but remember, he's older. He was away from the game. And as I said in the chat, I think that he was listening to the wrong people. I think, as you get older, one of the things, you have wisdom, you rely on your counselors, and there's just a disconnect. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see the offensive line going all these different ways and not knowing what they're doing. It seems like they're listening to a lot of different voices. And I don't know, between Chip Kelly and Carroll, the O-line coach, and Philbin, it just seems like there's too many voices in the room, and there's no clarity of purpose. So what I'd like to see from Carroll, and I believe he'll bring it next year, is you just kind of got to pull the reins a little bit and say, okay, I'm in charge. This is the message. We're all pulling in the same direction. And I think they evaluated Smith, not to rub it in. I told you on a call that wasn't on, I didn't believe in Smith this off season. And I think they also had a much higher opinion of Smith than is the reality. So we got to get the quarterback position fixed. We got to get the OL fixed. And again, I'm not sold on SpyTech. I wouldn't mind replacing him. It's probably not going to happen. But we got to be much better at evaluating our current talent and also talent in the draft. Thanks, guys.
MDM, great call, man. And Mo, we've been talking about that the last week, right? A lot, which is talent evaluation. And maybe there's some outages there. People want to fire SpyTech already. It's like, dude, you want to fire a GM every year? Like, I look, I'm not defending some of the moves he made. The jury's still out on a lot of it. At the same time, you can't continue. And we talked about this last year. You can't just fire everybody when things don't go well. Now, there's certainly times when you can, if it's going so poorly, but his point about the quarterback position, all this stuff, it's all valid. And you're right. And we said this before the year began, didn't we, Mo, that they weren't going to go from 4 wins to a championship team in one season. It was going to take multiple years. We just wanted to see progress, like MDM talked about.
Right, and I think Dave Casper the Ghost said it perfectly. He said he didn't care about, not that he didn't care about wins. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he just wanted to see progress. The wins didn't bother him. Is this team progressing in the right direction? Right now, you can't really say that. Of MDM's comments, one thing he said stood out to me most, and it's the fact that he was talking about Pete Carroll and having too many voices. The players are listening to too many voices, and Pete Carroll has to rein it in. Scott, isn't this the same problem we went through with Antonio Pierce?
Absolutely.
Right? Isn't this is the exact same problem, right? Where we felt like Antonio Pierce had too many guys with input, and he needed to trust his own football knowledge acumen and make decisions. Why is it that we're going through that with, if this is the case, we shouldn't be going through that with Pete Carroll? Antonio Pierce, you can see it because he's an inexperienced head coach. He's going to lean on his counsel. He had Marvin Lewis in there with him. Pete Carroll has won a Super Bowl. He's been to multiple Super Bowls, won a natty. He's accomplished. He's probably going to go into the Football of Fame. Take charge. If that's the case, and Pete Carroll's not taking charge and he's letting his assistants take over, that's a bad sign. It's a terrible sign. And what I will say about the Geno Smith MDM, I do remember the call, and MDM has been on this. Give him credit for that. He said, I don't trust Geno Smith. I don't like this Geno Smith move. Just go for a bargain bin quarterback and draft one high and go that route versus giving Geno Smith a new contract. So kudos to MDM on that when he said it. What I will also say, though, is, and I said this on X, Scott, Geno Smith is playing the worst ball of his career. This is not the Geno Smith that was in Seattle. If you told me that Geno Smith was going to be on pace for 28 interceptions by week 5, I don't think anybody predicted that because he wasn't this bad. And while I did say he has some 3 interception games in him, he wasn't this bad with turning the ball over in Seattle. 15 interceptions last year. He only had 9 in 2023. He only had 9 interceptions in 2023. He has 7 right now. So this is by far the worst ball Geno Smith has ever played. And a lot of even the Geno Smith haters couldn't say, well, yeah, he's going to throw 28 picks. No one saw that coming.
Right. And you got to wonder what the reasoning is, right? I mean, some mechanical, okay, we talked about that, holding onto the ball too long, being, telegraphing passes a little too much. But for that stark change, it's just crazy. And I look to coaching too. What is going on with the culture there? What is happening? And I'll say this to folks out there. I see a lot of people concerned with what Maxx Crosby thinks. Who gives a flying rat's ass, to be honest with you? Maxx Crosby's a great player, great guy, got nothing against him. But who cares? Well, he's going to want out. Well, if he wants out, then he wants out. We saw he fought for a coach last year. How'd that go? Okay, so I think you have to take opinions. You have to look at what's happening in the locker room. And I hope that what struck me about his call too was that what's the unifying message? Outside of let's go out and win and be a team, I get that. But sort of what is that mantra? And it's hard to identify that. So we'll see if they can come up with it. And maybe it starts with a big win in Indy. Mo, before we get out of here, give me your prediction. First of all, thank you to all the callers. We appreciate that. If you want to call in for the next show, I'd say wait till after the game. 702-900-7869. That's 702-900-7869. Mo, how does this one go down? Give me what you see happening and your score prediction, Mostradamus.
As much as it pains me to say it, Scott, I think it's going to be a struggle offensively for the Raiders. As I alluded to during the show, I think they're going to have issues covering the pass on the back end if Eric Stokes does not play. I have the Colts winning 28-20 at home, sending the Raiders to 1-4.
Wow. Okay. We're kind of close here, except I have less faith in the Raiders offense, despite some of the Colts defensive challenges. I'm going 31-13.
Wow.
Colts.
Picked this up. Yeah. Blowout. I thought my prediction was painful. Man, that was painful.
I just think that I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to get the offense going enough. They might improve. I know 13 points doesn't seem like a big improvement. But if you don't turn the ball over, that's improvement number 1. Number 2 would be running the ball. But can you effectively score against that Colts defense? I just don't buy it yet. I mean, yes, the Colts have some issues, but I've seen nothing from the Raiders that gives me any confidence that they can score 2 or 3 touchdowns. I just don't see it. So I'm going 31-13.
Scott, you know what this means, though, right, Scott? You know what this means, right? That means the Raiders are going to win the football game because we both picked against them.
There you go. I hope it's true. And then we'll pick against them the rest of the way to make the fans happy. Right. Anyway, big reminder for our folks on the video. Sleeper is our big sponsor here. You get a $100 match up to a $100 deposit playing daily fantasy football with the Sleeper Picks app. If you don't use the Sleeper app, go get it. I use it for my fantasy football leagues. And we got to talk about that next week. We didn't talk this week again about our fantasy football league. I'm not doing well in it. Mo's doing pretty good in it. We'll talk about that next week. We got to get some people on as well. But use the code GENTY with the Sleeper Picks app, GENTY, and get that $100 match on your $100 deposit for playing fantasy picks on that app. It's awesome. You got to check it out. Mo, tell everybody else what you got coming up. The remainder, I mean, obviously you got your lives coming up after the game. Let everybody know what's happening in Mo's world.
Sports not coverage for the Raiders. I have my 3 predictions as far as players are concerned and production. I know you just heard my prediction for the final score, but I'll explain why I think the way I do and how I think it will pan out. And of course, as Scott said, join me, Bleacher Report Live, for the post game. After the game, I'll be breaking down the win, the loss, the tie, whatever the case may be, and where do the Raiders go from there after week 5.
All right, there you go. So you're caught up on Mo's World. We will be back after the game, of course, an early game. So we'll see you in the afternoon on the West Coast. Murph and I will be back with the post-game show live as well to recap what happened in Indianapolis. So join us wherever you get your video. And then, of course, it's available right after as well on audio. I know a lot of you listen to that either on Sunday evening or Monday morning on your way into work. But we will be back for that. Mo, my friend, take care. Have a great weekend, man. Enjoy the coverage and the work. And I'll talk to you early next week.
Take care, Scott. Take care, Raider Nation.
All right. For our producer, Mike Robier at Odyssey, we appreciate his work all the time. And for Momo, and I'm Scott Branson. This has been Silver and Black Day. Don't forget, subscribe wherever you get your audio. Also on video, do the same thing. We will see you after the game, Raider Nation. Enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy your weekend. Take care.